Hello Ultrawide fans, let's see how Assassin's Creed Shadow performs at the trusty 3440x1440p resolution. Let's start off by looking at the base performance without any upscaling or frame generation. Here we are using ultra high settings with ray tracing on, as it's on by default at every performance level. At a glance you can see that no cards are able to reach 60 FPS. The 4090 and 700 XTX are clearing the 45 FPS mark, but the 4090 is the only one of the two with 1% lows over 30. So it's the only card that is going to have a reasonable play experience with a monitor that has both variable refresh rate and low frame rate compensation. The 7900 XTX's 1% lows are very bad, but I believe this is because the AMD GPUs have a higher CPU overhead, and we have finally gotten to a game where my 5800X3D is no longer enough to keep up. You will see why I say it's CPU related when we get to the frame generation results. Moving on, we see the 4080, 4070 Ti, and 700 XT all clear 30 FPS for their average. The 4080 does manage to keep its 1% lows above 30, so with low frame rate compensation, you can have a console-like experience. The 4070 Ti and the 700 XT are both seeing sub 30 FPS 1% lows, with the XT suffering even more due to its CPU overhead issues. And finally, we had the 4070, whose both average and 1% lows are below 30 FPS. Since none of our cards manage 60 FPS, let's turn on some quality upscaling to see if any of them make it across the line. Turning on quality upscaling for both DLSS and FSR puts the 4090 close enough to 60 for the number on the graph to round up, but it's actually only getting 59.5 FPS. And its 1% lows come up just shy of the 45 FPS, which is my personal 1% low cutoff for performance that I would consider smooth gameplay on an active sync monitor. The 700 XTX also gets near 60, but its 1% low stays CPU hampered and disastrously low. The RTX 4070 Ti and RTX 4080 both clear 45 FPS for their averages, and 30 FPS for their lows, so you will have a playable experience on any monitor with low frame rate compensation. The 4070 Ti jumping out in front of the 4080 has happened to me before when testing AC Valhalla. There's just something about the combination of resolution and the use of DLSS that the 4070 Ti benefits more from upscaling with the 4080. At high resolutions this doesn't happen, and the 4080 stays consistently 10% ahead of the Ti. But there's just something about the Assassin's Creed engine that causes this weird interaction. The 7900 XT and 4070 both clear 30 FPS, but the XT has terrible 1% lows, and the 4070 actually clears 30, so it can provide a console-like experience. Since none of the cards actually reach 60 FPS, the cutoff that AMD and Nvidia recommend for turning on frame generation, let's try and find more FPS by dropping the settings to high. With high settings on, we finally see some cards clear 60 FPS for their averages, with the 4090, 700 XTX, and 4080 clearing that mark. The RTX 4090 even managed to deliver 1% lows over 60 FPS for a smooth gaming experience. The 700 XTX is still seeing poor 1% lows, though they now clear 30 FPS, while the 4080's 1% lows are quite good at 50. The 4070 Ti just misses out on hitting 60, but it has a very tight 1% lows, so the experience will be smooth on a VRR monitor. Both the 7900 XT and the 4070 clear the 45 FPS mark for a playable game experience, but the XT still has disastrously low 1% lows, while the 4070 has very tight 1% lows. That will allow it to take full advantage of VRR to provide a fine experience. Finally, with some of our cards clearing 60 FPS mark, we can turn on frame generation to see what kind of performance jump we get. AC Shadows has integrated both DLSS and FSR frame generation, so this is one of the few games where the frame gen battle is a fair fight. The 4090 sees the biggest gains I've ever seen with NVIDIA frame generation. The new DLSS 4 enhanced frame generation is nearly twice as efficient as DLSS 3 frame gen was. The 4090 sees some very high refresh rates, clearing 120 FPS and 1% lows over 100 for a true high refresh rate experience. The 700 XTX, 4080, and 4070 Ti all clear 90 FPS with their averages, and surprise surprise, are all in their 80s for the 1% lows. So you may be wondering, how did the 700 XTX improve its 1% lows so much when frame gen is turned on, when the expectation is for a 10 to 15% performance hit to both the average and 1% lows before the frames are doubled? Well, the average did see a performance hit, but somehow the 1% low saw a 25% performance gain before being frame doubled. Well, the only explanation I have for this is that the time between each regular frame, when the GPU is working on the generated frame all by itself, is enough time for the CPU to catch up and prepare the next regular frame for the GPU, relieving the CPU bottleneck. So, amazingly, frame gen is the smoothest and most responsive way to play with an AMD GPU, if your CPU is a little on the slow side. Moving down the stack, the 700 XT and the 4070 both clear 60 FPS with their averages, and 1% lows, a feat that would have never been possible for the 4070 with the less efficient DLSS 3 frame gen. I'm extremely pleased with what NVIDIA has been able to do, increasing the frame gen efficiency with DLSS 4. Now, let's look at the performance uplift for each performance setting. The overall results show a smooth progression through the performance tiers, with the 700 XTX performing very well against the NVIDIA cards, despite this game having ray tracing used at every performance setting, from ultra high to low, as long as you have an equally monstrous CPU to feed it, that is. Thank you for watching. If you like these videos and want to catch some more, please subscribe. The more of you that subscribe, the better my chances are to get some GPU vendor to notice me and send me some test samples. If you have a super ultrawide or a 5K 2K monitor, those videos are coming up soon, or may be available on my channel for you to watch right now. If you want to help this channel out directly, you can click on my affiliate link below to buy anything on Amazon, or you can sign up for my Patreon, or become a member here on YouTube. I'm Scott, and I'll see you next time, Ultrawide fans.